All right, I want to know.
Know what?
You've had something going from the start. You've got a plan now. I want to know now. I swear.
I haven't got any plan.
What you so happy about? What's going on?
Nothing's going on.
You silly sod. You're going to die.
So are you, sooner or later.
You're going to die fucking soon, mate.
All right. Check. I think it's working.
Welcome to Lost and Found and Rewound. Let me start that again. Welcome to Lost and Found and Rewound, a podcast with two loquacious hosts that could easily jibba-jabba away for hours, diving down one nerdy rabbit hole after another, and a third host who might be fine letting the other two talk away while he silently hoards gold nuggets of wisdom.
Which one is... I talk once in a while.
I'm Chris Lost.
Just a minute.
He doesn't even have a microphone anymore.
Not even going to say
Silent Jim.
Found Jim. That's me.
And, I should have thought of something before I said this. Let me think of a position. Rick Rewound.
Just a quick gut check on the season. The gym time has not been as sparse as I thought before I started editing. But it's not plentiful either. I don't say that for Jim's benefit because, as Jim has warned us in the past, as soon as I say something like that, it makes him want to talk less. I say that for Rick's benefit and my benefit. But it's Jim's birthday, so now he has to talk.
Talk.
Jim, before we let you talk,
Let's interrupt again. Don't let Jim talk.
I was jibba-jabbering away in the Fast Forward episode and forgot, I have several segments that I didn't get to because I wanted to talk about Quiet on Set. But Rick has an apology, so Rick, the floor is yours.
I just realized I just kept saying third act problems about people like Tim Burton, and I actually mean second act problems. I think they have second act problems, a lot of these directors. Third act, it's that middle part where things fall apart. I just was listening back to some episodes, and I keep saying third act problems, which people have, but sometimes people have second act problems, and that's worse, actually, for me.
Yeah, because you got to... If I lose interest in the middle, I don't know. I hate a bad ending too, though.
Yeah, bad endings are bad. Yeah, so I want to apologize to Tim Burton. He doesn't have third act problems. He has second act problems.
Oh, I thought your apology was something about the monkeys and Chuck Berry.
Oh, yeah, that too. I forgot about that one. I said that the car designer was Chuck Barris, who was the host of The Gong Show, right?
Correct.
And then it's actually, now I can't remember his name. Who was the car designer? George Barris? George Barris.
Sounds right, yeah.
And then, even to complicate things further, George Barris didn't design the Monkey Mobile. It was somebody else. George Barris, he started work on the Batmobile and couldn't finish it and gave it to this other guy, and this other guy is the guy who finished off the Batmobile and did the Monkey Mobile. But I can't remember his name.
Well, I typically fact check as I go through, as I edit, too. So sometimes, like, if I say something, I make sure it's true, or if you guys say something and you're not sure, I'll check it and cut it out if it's inaccurate. I can't believe I didn't catch that, so I guess...
Well, it's sort of part of being a professor is you say stuff and you just make sure you sound like you know it's true and it's a fact. So it's just having the confidence.
It's a part of being president. It's really the part of being any career, really.
Yeah, exactly. Just talk, or being a man, I guess, probably, right? Just talking confidently, even if you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Just be confident.
June Diane Raphael on the last, or on a recently released, I think it was a re-release of an old episode, said, "Oh, the confidence to be an average white man."
Exactly.
This segment is called I Apologize. I forgot to say that. So I apologize for that. My apology is there is no boat in the Madonna video Borderline. It's an on-the-streets 80s fashion riff, reminiscent of Desperately Seeking Susan, which was directed by Susan Seidelman, who also directed many music videos. I don't know if you guys have seen Desperately Seeking Susan.
Again, probably 40 years ago, I saw that either in the theater or at a college.
I saw it at LaGrange Theater.
Ooh.
And I was really excited to see it there because it was $1 theater back then.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, another music video director making films.
Susan Seidelman's movie before that, was that, is it Smithereens?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I just watched that a while ago. I haven't watched Desperately Desperately Steven Seagal. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Desperately Seeking Smithereens. Desperately Seeking Smithereens. Desperately Seeking Smithereens by Susan Seidelman. Desperately Seeking... I can't do it. All right, I'm glad we got that cleared up. Jim, the synopsis of the film we watched today?
Well, okay, we watched the hit, 1984, with John Hurt and Tim Roth and Laura Del Sol and Terence Stamp. Tim Roth's first movie. Probably like one of Terence Stamp's, well, not after he came back, he kind of disappeared after the 60s, and I guess Superman was his big return, so this was after Superman.
General Zod.
Yeah. John Hurt's a hitman, and Terence Stamp is a informant on the run, well, hiding in witness protection in Spain, and 10 years later, his past catches up with him, and John Hurt is sent to kill him. John Hurt has to take him back to the boss to Paris from Spain, so it's just a road movie where they're trying to get back to Paris to finish him off.
What do you think it was about? I have a theory, but it is greatly colored by my recent life experiences.
I think Terence Stamp actually dies at the beginning of the movie, and it's all of like his fantasy of his life 10 years later in Spain, but then he does get caught and taken.
It's like in the courtroom scene, they kill him.
And I think there's an interview with the director where he says that. He says, Terence Stamp dies right at the beginning of the movie.
It's possible.
There were echoes of Siesta in this film. The opening credits are over the place where they are killed.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, John Hurt walks up to that memorial, and that's the opening credit, and then that's where they come back to.
Siesta was after, right? So this movie possibly influenced Siesta.
It could have.
See, I watched it a while ago with the commentary track, which is great. You guys should watch that. The interesting thing about this was Stephen Frears, the director, they were filming it in Spain. It was probably not a very big budget. It's a road movie, and they're just doing it. They're just like a small crew, and they're just cruising around Spain filming it. The editor was back in London, and they just send the film back to him. He was just editing it together, and he'd talk on the phone with Stephen Frears, and Stephen Frears wasn't really watching any of the daily rushes and whatever, He would just talk to him on the phone and kind of had an idea, and would just piece it all together back there. And I don't know if he was even getting edits of it back, or it was a little confusing, but it sounds like Stephen Frears has a really good memory too. It's like the editor would have a problem with something, and it was like, well, I think we shot some of this stuff a little bit earlier, and he'd remember all the shots, and it's like, go back and get, maybe use these shots. And he wasn't doing this in the editing room. He was just doing it on the phone, talking back to the guy, editing it.
What's the movie about?
I guess death again, of course.
That was my theory.
It's a movie about death.
Prepared for it. And that's the whole thing with Terence Stamp, is like he's had 10 years to think about this, and he's read a lot and philosophized about this, life and death and everything, and it's all a facade, or, it's like he breaks down, he doesn't have it all figured out, or he's just, he's scared. It's like just a lot of talk.
And I thought maybe it's even more subtle, where it's like he was like, oh, I'm going to get to Paris, and that's when I'm going to die. I know how I'm going to die. I know the timeline. He falls apart and that may be me overinterpreting what's going on. I think you're right, is like, he wasn't actually, when he's actually faced with that moment, he falls apart. But for me, it's like, well, no, we had a schedule. You're messing with the schedule. We talked about when I was going to die, and it's tomorrow. It's not today. And he freaks out, which would be what I would do, right? If like I had a plan to death, and then the doctor said, no, we're going to kill you a day early. And then I'd be upset. I'd be like, well, no, wait a minute. I'm prepared to die tomorrow.
Yeah, that's giving me anxiety, you just saying that. Like being in a scenario where it's like, oh, it's going to be tomorrow, Mr. Lost, but now it's going to be today. I would lose my mind.
Who knows what would have happened the next day? So
But-
it's not fair to say that because
I think it is fair because Jim,
the same thing would have happened.
this is just like me at least having a deep problem with like, oh, my issues with scheduling, right? And everything like that. And then obviously Chris has the same problem. It'd be okay if the schedule got messed up.
That's what we all tell ourselves about other people's deaths. But if it was ours,
Yeah, we'd be.
obviously Terence Stamp was the most representative. Like, he had the 10 years to think about it. He had all these different philosophies. He was like, I was dead before I was born. I'll be dead again. You know, it's like which is kind of the thing I've thought about before is like, yeah, well, I was non-existent at one point. And I will be non-existent again. That troubles me to think about, but it didn't before and it won't in the future. It was either the change of schedule made him rattled or we just will never be ready. And I recently watched somebody who was very proud about the way that they were managing their health leading up to their demise. And then when their demise hit, they panicked. Their pride completely got washed away and they were like, I'm not ready to go. I don't want to go. Well, that's frustrating because you're like, well, you could have taken better care of yourself and this moment would have been years, maybe even decades away from now. And again, I'm probably putting my personal experience onto the movie, but I thought it was an interesting thing to think that this guy was playing the whole film as if he was cool with it. And then as soon as he was really faced with it, he was like, oh no. And then there was the stupid kid who probably didn't think he could die or would die. And of course, he was going to die the way he was living. You know, he was headed to be killed and then he got killed and it was like a surprise. Mm-hmm. And then there was the guy who lived dangerously and was just sort of caught and then kind of had reflections of the speeches that, in fact, he probably died the most peacefully because he was surprised at the event that killed him, the machine gun fire, and then had sort of the recollections of what Terence Stamp said and then kind of died the most peacefully of all three of them. And then there was the woman who fought and didn't die because they kind of say that throughout the film. The whole thing about her biting his hand and fighting him. And she's the representative of either a youthful spirit, somebody who was presented to us as 16, but who was actually 24, I think, when they made the movie. And then they questioned her age. Either way, she wasn't ready to go. And they kept saying things like that. Like, she's not ready.
Yeah.
And then she didn't go.
Right. When Terence Stamp disappeared, that was like a spiritual journey, right? Like he was...
In reality?
Yeah, in reality. Like
Yeah.
his life where he kind of dropped out, right? He went on kind of a...
I don't know if it's true, but he was dating the model, supermodel. I don't know if she left him, Shrimpton, one of the Shrimptons. And I don't know if that's true, if she left him, whatever. They broke up and then he went to India, like in the kind of the height of his fame in the 60s. Just kind of dropped out, I think. Or that's the story.
Probably, right, tying into that spiritual journey, coming to a
Yeah.
place of peace, but then not being completely at peace. But then also maybe like the guru thing, like so his words, now the character, right? He had all those things, and so even though he panicked at the end, his words and his wisdom, right, gave solace to John Hurt when he died. So it's an interesting,
Yeah, and his, like John Hurt looking at him, he's like a spiritual, like by the waterfall, John Hurt is like staring at him and he's like this weird mythical figure almost like in the waterfall, he's like this Christ figure or something, and John Hurt's like staring at him like, what's he all about? Or,
And that's when they have their big talk, like, why didn't you run?
Yeah.
And Terence Stamp sort of talks about, well, I knew this day was coming. You just find me anyway. I'm ready. And then sort of lays this whole rap about being ready to go.
I think originally they wanted Joe Strummer to do the Tim Roth character.
Oh, wow.
It sounded like, I don't know if Stephen Frears asked him or something, and it was like he got back, and Joe Strummer got back to him and was like, the guys won't let me do it, or the band. It was like, they were doing something. It was like, basically, he blamed it on the Clash. It was like, no, they won't let me do it. Tim Roth said that in the commentary. He heard that, and then he said, well, why don't you get that skinhead guy, that young kid, and it was Tim Roth he was talking about, was like on like a made-for-TV movie about skinheads, and I don't know if they were football hooligans, that kind of whole scene, whatever, but that was one of the first things Tim Roth did. I think it was a TV movie, but he was like a crazy skinhead punk. Joe Strummer supposedly suggested him. He had seen him on TV. I was like, oh, you should get that guy.
And Tim Roth won a newcomer award for this film, for his performances.
Do we want to talk a little bit about like Joe Strummer's acting? Like, we saw him in Mystery Train, right?
Right.
And
What would it have been like?
Yeah, I feel like he was never. Yeah, he was a little broad, or never quite gelled. Like in Mystery Train, he's a little weird,
Right.
but good, but not 100%. It does feel like a singer acting,
Right.
In Mystery Train, you could get away with that because it's a
kind of weird
characters, right?
Yeah. It's not totally real.
What's the other one that he's in? Straight to Hell, right? The guy who did Repo Man.
Yeah.
I have almost no memory of Straight to Hell, but it's similar, right? It's not similar, but it's like, I know there's like guns and the desert.
Yeah.
It's the desert. It's not Spain.
Right.
Or is it Spain? I'm trying to even remember the one with Joe Strummer.
Tim Roth to me was playing. He feels like he was playing Joe Strummer. He was acting like a punk and doing like things that felt like some scenes out of Quadrophenia. That whole thing where he went into the bar and stole the cervezas and punched and stabbed all the guys. It felt like a British punk kind of thing to do.
Yeah, but it's later. It's like it's not the 70s punk. It's the football hooligan. This is the start of all that, and the English soccer fans, and he's like more of just like a thug.
Have you read Amongst the Thugs?
Yeah.
Or is it Amongst the Thugs or Among the Thugs?
Among the thugs.
I read that book. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
It's great.
That's what this movie, the thing Tim Roth was in. I have to look into it, but I think it was kind of like that. It was the beginning of all that stuff, but he played a character like that, so he's kind of the same in this movie. Well, he's more of a criminal. He's more not just a soccer hooligan. He's into the beginnings of organized crime, or he's just on the fringes. He's just a apprentice.
There was a photo going around on the internet of the hat tests for Clockwork Orange. So like the Droogs, a bunch of photographs of them trying on different hats, like and seeing which hats will work, and it just reminded me of that of like the gang and.
Is it Malcolm
thugs.
McDowell? Is that who was in that?
Yeah, but it's the other guys like the what's his name? And he's in other stuff, but the guy who played Dim, it's just like 30 photographs of him with different hats on, and it's like, oh wow, they picked the right one because he would have looked like a total goofball in like the kind of like French military hat or something, It was.
On the WTF this week is Malcolm McDowell.
Oh, wow.
And it's really good. He talks a lot about the Beatles, actually. It's there's the mentions of Terence Stamp's mentions of John Lennon in here. I didn't realize how much Mick Jagger and Malcolm McDowell and all these people like worshipped John Lennon. They all felt he was like what did Jagger called him, the king? He's like, well, Lennon is the king, according to Malcolm McDowell. But he talks about his wardrobe. I'll let you guys listen to it. But he talks about wardrobe and how Kubrick and he just came up with some of the things that he was wearing just randomly, which doesn't sound. I was like listening to the story and I'm like, boy, this would be interesting if it's true. It doesn't sound very Kubrick.
I'm trying to remember the connection to the Who. Was it that Anthony Burgess saw the Who and in the book and he used them as a model, or maybe the Who were used as a model because Pete Townsend was wearing those white jumpsuits, right around that time, like around like 69, 70. And so I'm wondering if I'm thinking the Who influence isn't on Anthony Burgess, it was on Kubrick.
Whatever Doc Martens he was wearing.
Oh yeah, wearing the boots
with the jumpsuit.
Yeah, so yeah.
I actually started putting numbers on my guitars. I always loved
Oh
that.
yeah.
I love that look.
Yeah.
Well, we agree about what the film is about. For once, the writer of this film, Peter Prince, wrote a miniseries in 1980 on Oppenheimer.
1981, huh? Because I saw there's a miniseries from the 80s or early 90s with David Strathairn playing Oppenheimer. But this was earlier, huh?
Yeah,
1980.
I got 1980. Stephen Frears has done Dangerous Liaisons and Prick Up Your Ears. I've seen neither, but Prick Up Your Ears played at the Hinsdale Theater forever.
Prick Up Your Ears, I actually saw. That's Joe Orton. That's about Joe Orton, who was the guy who actually, oddly enough, he was the one who was hired to write the third Beatles movie, but he wrote a script, and it was super gay, right? And it was like, oh, I don't think we can do this. And in fact, somebody just produced it. I feel like somebody just produced Joe Orton's Beatles script as a play, or it's been published recently. So yeah, that's Prick Up Your Ears is about him. But then My Beautiful Laundrette, I think I saw that too. That's Stephen Frears.
Yeah. That was, I think, after a year or two after this.
Yeah, they were popular. These were popular films in the cinema club or whatever, that would play movies on the weekend at colleges.
He did, The Grifters.
The Grifters. Oh,
I
yeah,
saw
that's a
that.
great movie.
Great
Yeah,
film.
once I looked at these, I was like, oh, I didn't realize Stephen Frears did all these. And yeah, I saw that. And
He's an amazing filmmaker. I was watching Dangerous Liaison today, and I just impeccably well made.
and really successful. I mean, he's still, he did Philomena more recently and High Fidelity. Yeah, and The Queen is the other big one. He makes these hugely successful films, and he's been doing they're every several years. It's like another huge movie comes out directed by him.
And by huge, Jim, you're saying within that Anglophile English art kind of classy film world. It's not like Marvel huge, but it is.
They win Academy Awards.
You mean like most of the people on an island the size of Illinois went and saw it? Is that what you're saying?
I think it's more that he consistently makes like these high class films that are rarer and rarer.
But they're well received.
Yeah, well received, critically acclaimed, but Oscar level movies too.
Is The Queen the one where Tony Blair goes to convince the Queen to come back down to London after Princess Di has died?
I haven't seen it, but it's with Helen Mirren, right?
Right. That's a great film.
Yeah.
Very good.
The commentary track had Stephen Frears and the writer,
Peter Prince,
and the editor, who's Mick Audsley, who edited a lot of Stephen Frears movies. He did 12 Monkeys, too.
Ooh,
that
wow,
was something. He did other things, but he's done almost all of Stephen Frears movies since the hit, I think. He's, made like 90% of his films with him and said when he's not there, I get lost. Talking about, how it seemed like he was basically editing the film by himself in London, and Stephen Frears was just talking to him on the phone, and so it's obviously a
partnership
kind of thing.
W. Dave Keith, who came on the show last season, I've edited his films for 30 years now, and it's kind of that dynamic, whereas I just look at a bunch of footage and kind of start to assemble a story out of the footage, but I try and look at the footage and see what the footage tells me and put the scene together. And then he'll come in and either like that, or he'll say, but you forgot this shot or that shot or this shot. Shots that I've watched all of the shots, but I'm like, oh, that's what that shot was meant to do. And then so we have this nice dynamic where I might change the narrative of the film a little bit because I saw something different in the footage and he may like that. But then he always then takes me back to sort of a grounded place. Like, this is what I was intending to do. Like, this is cool. Let's keep this. But I was intending to do this and this as well, and he'll pull out some shots that I just couldn't make any sense of. That's a good dynamic for a director.
Yeah, and I think it was the Sidney Lumet book, realizing that there are situations like that where, especially older Hollywood, that idea of editing while filming and getting that feedback from the editors so that you kind of know if you've got gaps, holes, things don't make sense. And so I had never realized that. I always thought of that editing process as something that would happen after you'd shoot all the film and edit. But a lot of times, you have that more kind of collaborative process where the editor is actually working on the bits and pieces that are coming in and saying, hey, this we need a little something more here. And that's really interesting.
It sounded like at the beginning it was kind of wrong, or the editor was saying that he got it wrong at the beginning. He was focusing on Terence Stamp, the movie star kind of guy. And it was like, I don't know if Stephen Frears said him, or if they both decide, it was like, but no, it's like the focus has to be on John Hurt. That's the opening scene. They added the opening of him on the mountain top. The opening of the film is John Hurt. And it was like, I guess early edits of it was like more heavily Terence Stamp. And it was like, no, we got to focus on John Hurt.
There's a point where it kind of gets very Tim Roth for a while.
Yeah.
And then a little more focus on her as well when they go to the gas station. But I guess the common thread through all that is the John Hurt character.
And the gas station scene, the interesting thing too, I found out was after he kills the guy and the girl's gotten out of the car and it switches to the crazy overhead shot.
Right. Amazing
and
shot.
It's like, looks like, I don't know, Hitchcock or something. I don't know, but it just is this jarring shot and it's like amazing, just straight overhead aerial shot looking down of her crawling and him coming after her and them fighting. It sounds like that was not a mistake, but it was like they had shot all the stuff at the gas station and stuff didn't work. And so they just did that shot way later. And it may have even been in London or somewhere else, and they didn't have any scenery, so it's like, let's just shoot it from above, So
wow.
Brilliant.
instead of just trying to recreate
Brilliant.
the gas stations out in the middle of nowhere in Spain, this incredible vistas, and it was like, well, we can't go back there and shoot. I think it was during like the week later or something. It was like, we got to redo this stuff, or it doesn't work, and so let's just do. They probably did it in the city somewhere. It was like a crane, It's like just it is nowhere near where the other stuff was shot, and it's like just. But it's a really striking shot, but it wasn't really planned. It was just like, oh, well, let's just do this.
It's a perfect illustration of that's not a problem, that's a solution.
Yeah.
I love it.
Kansas City, food-wise once only known as a barbecue town. But thanks to the Taco the Town podcast, everything has changed. Kansas City has rightfully taken its place as a taco paradise, smack dab in the middle of the USA, and all of these tacos belong to us on the Taco the Town podcast. My name is W. David Keith, certified tacoholic, and I live a very taco-centric lifestyle. On the Taco the Town podcast, we're tasting every taco in the town. We shine a light on all of the taco-rific tacos Kansas City has to offer, unearthing great taco memories, checking the latest stories in taco news, and interviewing actors, reporters, chefs, politicians, and musicians about their love for tacos. If you love tacos like I do, you're gonna love Taco the Town. Available wherever you get your taco podcasts. A proud member of the Lotus Pod Podcasting Network.
Film made $876,000, $876,775.
Get it right, Chris.
$876,775 on an unknown budget. I couldn't figure out what the budget was of the film. In today's dollars, about 2.6 million box office take. So probably, I don't know, in 1984, maybe they spent $1 million on it. I don't know.
It really was not a big crew, and it was definitely just them driving around, shooting stuff, and it looks great. And even though I wish we'd watched the new copy. This is a rental copy of VHS that I got on eBay, which the previous one, like Siesta, was like, I think unplayed almost. It was a brand
Siesta
like
was pristine.
Yeah, this one was definitely a rental copy, so it was a little fuzzy, little mushy looking, but
I loved the VHS aesthetic, but then the cinematography on this I really, really liked. And so and I need to look at other Stephen Frears movies because I know that, but I know he worked with the cinematographer a few times after this too. Doesn't sound like as much as he did with the editor, but the movement, there's a lot of movement of the camera, a lot of scenes where it's instead of cutting, right, it's moving back and forth between characters, moving in, moving out. Even at the courtroom scene, there's stuff coming from above and kind of zooming into the judge.
Before he gets to the courtroom, the whole thing with the police, with him in hiding, they're in whatever, like a safe house or something, and they're taking him to the court. And that whole opening scene looks amazing on the restored version of it. It just looks like 1970, and even though it's filmed in 1980, it looks dead on like the 1970s, and it looks great.
Well, Criterion put it out, so I'm going to buy a Criterion version of it.
Yeah.
Pretty well received by critics, 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, 74% by audience.
I have a vague feeling this was a Siskel and Ebert film, right? I think they talked about it. This would have been a film that I would have heard about through them when they would talk about, smaller films.
Yeah, I don't remember how I came across. I mean, I watched it in high school. We rented it. Me and my friends, like, one night, it was like, I just remember the opening and the Eric Clapton, the guitar stuff. And I was like, I didn't really like Eric Clapton. I was like, but I thought that music was really cool. And at the time, I was like, it just was a really striking opening. And after listening to Double Nickels on the Dime that day, probably, I was like, this is something different.
I'm going to look up what Clapton album he was working on, because there's one good Clapton album. in his entire career.
I guess Eric Clapton just did the opening credit, and it was like, well, I can't top what's his face, who's the Spanish guitar player, is the master. So he just gave them like one song, for the opening. And
That was the thing. I heard all that Spanish guitar, and I'm like, oh, please don't tell me that Clapton has played this, because my theory is the guy has no energy, and that's why his music is just so weak. Like that whole I think I've said it before on the show. Is like, I get off on screaming guitars, and then the guitar solo that follows goes meow meow meow, and you're just like, wow, that's a real screaming guitar there, buddy.
So it looks like Siskel and Ebert both gave it a thumbs down. If the emoticons that are associated with this YouTube video, they break down each movie and they show a little thumbs up or thumbs down emoticon thumbs, and it sounds like both Siskel and Ebert gave it a thumbs down, so that must not have been where.
surprising.
This was 10 years after the only good Eric Clapton album. 461 Ocean Boulevard came out in 1974. This film came out in 1984.
Lay Down Sally.
Lay Down Sally.
Yeah, I always like the guitars on that. But that's all the. Is that Muscle Shoals? Who did he do that with?
Probably.
Yeah, that's the Muscle Shoals record, right?
I like Layla. It's a good record.
Yeah.
461 Ocean Boulevard is pretty good, pretty bearable. The rest is just absolute garbage.
Well, the other funny thing, it was also Fernando Rey is in it, who's like this huge Spanish actor who doesn't get to say anything. It's great. It's like they were kind of embarrassed in the commentary talking about this, so they got Fernando Rey and don't let him say anything through the whole movie until the end.
Muttering things to pointing at a picture or something, and you can't hear. Yeah. And what's the story of Fernando Rey in The French Connection, right? He's the wrong one. Like, there's always the story about how, so he's the guy who's the French Connection, right? He's the one who's smuggling the drugs in his car. That's Fernando Rey. But it was a mistake. William Friedkin wanted...
Another French guy.
Yeah, a different guy. And then the casting person was, we'll get... And
Spanish. Spanish guy.
And then Fernando Rey shows up, and William Friedkin's like... Okay, we'll use this guy, but it's not the guy I wanted. It's like it was a mistake, but it worked out.
I'm just going to talk about the commentary track. At the very end, there's a funeral. Like after John Hurt gets gunned down, and then it's the end of the movie, and they're just showing a funeral in Spain, kind of like there's one at the beginning too.
Flashing back to the.
That's what they were saying in the commentary track. It was like, whose funeral is this? And it was like they were all confused. They're the ones who made the movie, and they're like nobody was sure whose funeral this was. And it was like 40 years later, I guess. But then they all kind of came to the conclusion. Someone was like, well, it's Willie's funeral because he lived in Spain for 10 years, so he had friends.
Right.
And I was trying to look at after seeing it again, to see if the priest was the priest he's talking to at the beginning when he's walking around the town and with his bodyguard, and the priest shows up and he's talking to him. And I have a feeling it might be him. I don't know if it's that detailed, but it obviously wasn't John Hurt's funeral.
Jim, which character is you in this film?
I don't know. Maybe like the Australian guy. Beauty. No, Ripper. Yes, I love it. He's really funny. But no, I don't. I have little pieces of all of them. No.
I think you've already used that one.
Yeah.
You got to come up with a different one.
Yeah. I'd like to say Terence Stamp, of course, but I don't know if I'm that deep.
Yeah, I would want to say that too, but yeah,
I don't know.
You can't be Terence Stamp.
No.
Nobody can be Terence Stamp. You want to be Terence Stamp.
Right.
Right?
I don't know. I think you're better than Terence Stamp. I think he chickened out at the end.
Right.
He was a poser.
Right.
Rick, was there somebody that you related to in the film?
Yeah, I want to be Terence Stamp. But it's not going to happen. Dream on, Rick.
I think I was Tim Roth when I was young, stupid, probably going to die in a stupid way because of the way I was acting. And then when I was old, I think I am the Australian guy, watching football, bragging about. Was that his apartment, or he was just invading someone's apartment?
Yeah, he's another criminal. He's like laying low, and it's this. Whatever, I forgot his name. Bruno. It's Bruno's apartment, and he was like, it's some other higher up guy, and he just knew he wasn't there, so he's just hiding out, but is an acquaintance of him, and obviously knows John Hurt. Yeah, he wasn't supposed to be there. That's why John Hurt assumed, probably called Bruno or whatever, and was like, yeah, the place is empty. Yeah, the Australian guy wasn't supposed to be there.
I think I might be John Hurt.
Wow.
I think that fits.
It makes me so sad.
Why does it make you sad? He was pretty cool.
Yeah, he's cool. I feel like that's gonna I worry about having a thinking I've escaped death or something, and then just getting killed stupidly because of a stupid choice I made.
It's because he smashed up the guitar, too, at the end.
That's true.
He maybe would have made it if he didn't smash the guitar.
Get angry at the pawn shop guy in the little cage.
Yeah, and I think it was an attack on Spain, the whole culture of Spain. I think that's what that was symbolic of, too. Well, and it wasn't him who said it, was Tim Roth. Let's get out of this godforsaken country or something. He says that. It's like, get the hell out of this country. I think that's what he says.
So now I'm thinking about that. So I'm thinking about Tim Roth is in Hateful Eight, right? And there's a guitar smashing in Hateful Eight. And so thinking about the influence of this film. And so...
Yeah, I thought this had a huge influence on Quentin. I was like, this is so much better than a Quentin Tarantino movie.
And I preferred what you called him was Quentintino. If you
Quentintino.
could rewind and edit that out in... Chris, Quentintino. I love it. Quentintino.
Quentintino.
Have you ever had a Quentintino? It's part gin and part bitters.
An exact copy of another drink, but they've just given his name to it.
Yeah, it's a martini with a little bit of beer in it.
I was thinking of The Limey. So have you seen The Limey? Steven Soderbergh film with Terence Stamp. And so Terence Stamp is more he's not quite the John Hurt character in The Limey. He's more verbal, although he is kind of stocky. I've watched The Limey with the commentary track. There was a while where I was listening to every Steven Soderbergh commentary track because of how much of a student of film he is too, and he talks all about the influences. And I've got to watch that again and listen, because he'll just come out and say, "Oh yeah, this Terence Stamp is in there here because of the hit," And it's like, we'll explain all that. I was watching the Donald Glover, Mr. and Mrs. Smith series. There's an episode in Spain where they're grabbing. Ron Perlman is playing a mobster of some sort who they have to kidnap, but they're actually kind of rescuing him. They're protecting him. The scene with Terence Stamp, when Terence Stamp is in the car and he's like, "Can we open the windows?" and everything like that. Whole scene in this episode of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is also felt like, oh, this whole episode of Mr. and Mrs. Smith is influenced by the hit. I mean, I guess that's why it's a Criterion film, right? Is because it's may not have gotten 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert, but it's definitely had an influence on filmmakers.
The Spiderland of indie films.
Exactly. Not necessarily completely acclaimed in its day, but it's definitely been influential on a lot of significant filmmakers.
Speaking of Tarantino and that generation of filmmakers, Guy Ritchie, we were talking about earlier, The Gentleman TV show, I watched the movie and the TV show. The TV show is gorgeous. It's absolutely brilliantly well shot and made, and the acting is pretty good. Everybody's pretty good in it. The writing is pretty good, so maybe there's a little scripting weakness on Guy Ritchie's stuff. But The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's a beautiful movie and really made well. It's a fun action film. And this Gentleman stuff is right there with that. Just all his tricks, split screens, and use of time, and all these different things. It's like he's a real masterful filmmaker, but I think that because he came around in the Tarantino era, I think Tarantino kind of outshadowed a number of filmmakers who were really good filmmakers, but they just weren't, I guess, as influential or as impactful or as sort of brazen. I don't know how to describe. I like Quentin Tarantino's movies, and they do have a lot of something, whereas these filmmakers mostly have a normal amount of things in their films, but they're good. And I think that Guy Ritchie's a guy who kind of got undervalued or written off as a Tarantino wannabe, when I think he was trying to do his own thing, and it was just kind of similar.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Guy Ritchie, but but it's true. It's true. And some of that is the streaming money, but it is the quality of films, the visual quality, and some of that's CGI, and some of that's just digital technology now, right? You're not burning film. It's true. I mean, things look so much better.
Oh, yeah.
Although I just watched The Holdovers, right, which is going the exact opposite direction to the point where it has a copyright 1972 on it. In the opening scene, it's like leaning so far into, okay, we're gonna make this look like a 1970s movie. I'm basically gonna make a Hal Ashby movie down to the film stock and the copyright date. and the music. It's interesting what's going on is I've talked about this before. The only thing I loved about The Irishman, the best thing about The Irishman was the digital recreation of a Howard Johnson's from 1968 or 69. It was just so beautiful. It transported me. It was like, wow. And realizing that this technology can do amazing things and make such visually arresting things. But also, it is a little sad that you don't have the graininess anymore or the sloppiness. But it seems like people are starting to go back to that more sloppy sort of.
Everything's on your palate now.
Yeah.
And The Gentleman was better. Beautiful, bold, rich on an OLED TV with real blacks. It was mind-blowing how gorgeous it was. Should this film be lost? Jim?
No, definitely not. Everybody should go see this.
In the theater.
In the theater, yeah.
They should go see it in the theater. It'd be amazing to see in the theater.
Yeah.
There could be a 40-year
Anniversary.
film, in theaters, but we'd be there.
Yeah.
Who else would show up is the question.
Well, if they did it downtown Chicago, it'd be packed.
It would be packed, probably. Especially if you told people it was influential on Quintino.
If our Alamo Drafthouse could serve the signature Quintino drink. Rick, should this film be found, would you recommend this to a student or a coworker?
I don't know, but you always say that. I mean, in general, I'd recommend it. I did drift off a little bit. It's a little existential, I guess. But I'm going to watch it again. So that's Rewound, though. Did you ask me Rewound?
I said found. Would you
Found.
recommend it?
But I'm Rick Rewound. I would recommend it. I definitely would recommend it to my film school kid, and he won't watch it. I recommend all sorts of stuff, but yeah, it's just so visually arresting. I loved the camera movement.
You're right. And I think it should be rewound. I'm going to watch it again. I'm going to buy it on Criterion.
Going to buy it on Laserdisc.
There's a big movement for people who have Laserdisc collections now, which just blows my mind because from what I understand, they erode.
Oh, yeah, I bet they do. Yeah, they're like giant CDs.
Mm-hmm. People are getting fed up with streaming. They are starting to buy physical media, thank God, because I've got a bunch I'd like to sell them. Yeah, that is coming back. There is something I need to mention. We got some emails.
Whoa. Your desperate cry for emails has been answered.
It has.
Oh, nobody emails us.
Careful for what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
And I'll say we got very lovely emails. That's just in a stage where we went from having hundreds of listeners back to having half the listeners of what we had when we put out our first episode. We're back down. We really knocked it down the time that I stretched this out, getting this started up again. We've lost a lot of listeners, but we're back to the beautiful core. And in the beautiful core is Marv Quibell from Pods Like Us. He wrote us an email and asked if we'd ever do The Exterminator.
Which is that?
That's a dead-on pick for this podcast. It's an action film with a guy who goes around with a flamethrower righting the wrongs that were done to people.
Vaguely familiar.
It's a little too trashy for this podcast, but I mean, a great pick. And then
a Chris pick. It sounds like a Chris pick to me.
It looks a little more up my alley, but of course, my films have artistic merit despite being genre films. And then John Whitney from the radio show Stellar Spectrograph, WXOX Louisville 97.1 FM, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. He wrote to talk about Godzilla. He's really happy that we were doing Shin Godzilla.
Cool.
Asked about Godzilla -1, which I guess you can't see in the United States this year because there's an agreement between the people who make the Japanese Godzillas and the U.S. Godzillas that in a year of a U.S. Godzilla, you cannot release or show a Japanese Godzilla.
Really? So it just won some stuff in the Oscars, right?
It did, but nobody can see it.
Oh, criminy.
Wow.
I wanted to see it.
And I saw it in the theater, but I remember I saw it in 2023 in
Yeah.
December with my son. And it's an awesome, I mean, it's the best. No wonder they don't want that competition because it's way better than I saw the new Godzilla too, and it is.
I noticed
bad.
I was at Circle K and they had some sort of sandwich and it was the Godzilla versus Kong breakfast sandwich or something.
Well, this is Godzilla times Kong.
Oh, okay.
The
Sorry.
Godzilla versus Kong was the last
Okay,
one.
so this is Godzilla times. Sorry, man.
Yeah, and it's It's okay. I mean, it's
Yeah.
no. I mean, you would hate it, Rick. It's
Yeah.
it takes a lot of patience to say it's okay. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
I got to get back to Don Quixote. We're seeing all these windmills and the hits and stuff.
Spain, yeah.
Another windmill.
Yeah.
Jim, this is another film that you picked with a windmill in it.
Yeah, and set in Spain.
Oh
so-
no, I'm mixing up windmills and lighthouses.
Right. That's
My bad.
My previous film was in Spain, though.
That's true. Was there a
Yes.
lighthouse in the previous film?
No,
We saw a lighthouse somewhere.
that was in Paper House.
Paper House.
Paper House.
That had a lighthouse? Yeah.
Yep. I thought there was another lighthouse we came across.
Maybe. Could be some deep themes.
What's your best birthday, Jim, ever? Best birthday ever? Hot seat. Best birthday present ever.
Ooh. I found a picture from Christmas, probably, I don't know how old you would have been, but it's a picture of you holding up a Polaroid one-step and me with my arms folded looking upset. And it's jokingly, but like I was actually also upset. But that was Christmas.
I still have that. It still works, I think.
Of course you do.
I'm tempted to buy. Yeah, I haven't tested it in decades, but since that all came back and people are making those cartridges again, I should try.
So
But
expensive,
yeah,
though. Yeah.
I don't want to even start messing with that. I don't know if this is really a birthday. Oh, it was my Motovacan. I still have my 16th birthday. That was kind of a birthday
Motorcycle?
present.
Got that big fancy motorcycle for his 16th birthday.
Motobacan was like a 10-speed, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember those were fancy.
they did make mopeds. Yeah, I still have that. That's a great. It's not a really fancy bike, but it's nice and it looks great. Classic 80s steel framed 10-speed. Looks great.
Did it have the horn, the like, sort of ram horn handlebars?
Yeah, like
10-speed.
the classic
Yeah.
drop bars, whatever you call them.
I think they're called ram horn.
Yeah, I get.
That's what I call
those
them.
are
Yeah,
those are. I think those are the
those
straight
are the
ones.
straight ones, yeah. That's true.
Oh no, I guess a ram is curled. Yeah, I don't know.
I drove by an iconic bike shop today. I don't know if you guys remember it.
Terry's Bike House.
Is that what it is? The one that has like sort of the bikes out?
The big ape on the
Over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coming this way.
Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, that's where I bought my Schwinn Scrambler as a kid. Is it the same owner and everything, or?
It's always been a bike shop, so maybe someone else bought it. Yeah, I don't know if Terry's still around.
Probably not. But
No.
I just remember I loved going to that place
Yeah.
to look at bikes.
I know we went there a couple times, but then we more often bought, like, I felt like we bought
We got our
Schwinn's.
the Stingrays there.
Oh, okay. 'Cause
Definitely.
the one in LaGrange
That was later. Yeah.
in Calendar Court Mall. There was a
Yeah.
bike shop there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we definitely got bikes at Terry's.
Terry's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have mag wheels on your Stingrays?
No, this was before that. This was pre-dirt bike era.
Oh, yeah. Stingray has got a banana seat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although Scrambler. Yeah, Scrambler was the dirt bike.
Scrambler
Yeah,
was the
that's
dirt
what I
bike.
had one of
That's
those
what I
with. I got it in
And
LaGrange.
now we can't trigger me on talking about that. So Jim's Scrambler, and then my son and I restored it, and then my son was riding it around and then left it in front of the house and ran inside the house, and some guy in a truck came by and took it because it was on the parkway. At the time, there was curbside bulk pickup.
Oh, no.
And so this guy would drive around and yeah, if he saw a bike or something sitting there, he'd just take it. And so there were some construction guys going, I don't think that kid left that bike out there to be thrown away. I think it's a kid's bike, and the guy just yoinked and drove off with a 1976 Schwinn Scrambler.
I shouldn't laugh. That's terrible.
Yeah, it is. It really upsets me to this day.
Then, what proceeded was Rick's version of Taken, where he used his very particular set of skills to kill that guy.
I did use my particularly, what is it?
A very particular set of skills.
I mean, I had alerts on like Craigslist and everything trying to see if I find this freaking bike, see when this guy sold this bike, and it didn't pan out.
Virtual Taken.
Yeah. Now I'm sad and angry.
That's not very Terence Stamp of It's just
not.
an object.
I want to be Terence, but I can't.
I occasionally have moments of peace where, like, I talk myself into, like, don't worry about it. You're not going to be fired. Just keep working hard, be an honest, good person, and you won't get fired. And then, like, about an hour later, I'm like, I'm going to get fired.
Lost and Found and Rewound is fully funded by Lost and Found and Rewound Foundation funds. Lost and Found and Rewound does not use crowdfunding because our listeners have better things to do with their funding. There's no need to post reviews of Lost and Found and Rewound because our listeners have more valuable things to do with their time. In all sincerity, thank you for listening to the show. We truly appreciate it.
Lotus Pod.